What's up, guys? This is Toomey from Primer 55, and you are checking out Vulgar Display of Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Vulgar Display of Podcast, live from the barn office. You got the Mox here, and I'm joined online with the original Vulgar Display of Podcast, Mr. Josh Toomey. Josh, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
So 4 years ago, me and my buddies just got a hair up or whatever, and we said, hey, we want to do a podcast. And, we don't know a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but we do know metal, and metal in the sense that we're just ultimate fans. So obviously Pantera is a big band for us. And I kind of put it in there you go. I kind of put it in the text and said, what should we call it? And somebody said Vulgar Display of Podcast. And we just rolled with it without even doing any research whatsoever, which looking back on it now, 4 years into this, I'm like, we were so dumb and green and naive. And then eventually saw that you had already had a podcast named that. So we appreciate the not cease and desist letter that you could have sent us.
I will say technically it was just like a tagline that I'm just playing with the name of the podcast. So it wasn't called Vulgar Display of Podcast. It was just kind of I'm going to make a Talk Toomey shirts. And then I think that might've been the time when I feel like it's when they re-released maybe, or did the little thing where you could type in your name and it would, spit out a Pantera logo.
Yeah.
So I think I just did that, and a buddy of mine added Vulgar Display of Podcast. So I mean, it definitely wasn't what the podcast was called. So I just thought it was funny that it popped up on another podcast. So all good, man. But you want to hear a funny story on all of this? Is I did that with Talk Toomey because obviously my last name is Toomey, and it's a play on words and all that good stuff. And I went for about a year not even thinking about it. And so I Googled Talk Toomey one day, and there's a speech pathologist in like Chicago. Her last name is Toomey. So her brand is Talk Toomey. And then there was a news anchor in Arkansas and it pops up on her as being her nickname. So like, I'm like the third Talk Toomey. So it's kind of the same thing where I started the podcast. I thought of doing a podcast on like a Tuesday, and 2 weeks later, the first episode popped up. So it wasn't even, I definitely didn't plan anything. I didn't have I never had a introduction episode, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to be doing, any of that stuff. Literally, the first episode, I don't think is online anymore. But I literally went into it like the first episode was like, "What's up, guys? This week on the podcast," like it had been going on for months. Like there was no introduction to this mayhem. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and we were the same. We just hopped right on and just look, like I said, looking 4 years removed from that or past that now. Not that we're experts by any means, but we at least have a little bit of experience under our belt. It's funny. And I never go back and listen to those old episodes because it's like, it's so cringy. I mean, even a couple months ago, it's kind of hard for me to go back and listen to stuff. But man, I do have a million questions for the podcast stuff. But one of the reasons that we decided to link up was Primer 55. Right. Yeah, so we're doing the 25 years of Introduction to Mayhem, and you guys are coming into our hometown, St. Louis, here in about a week and a half.
It's coming right up, man.
Yeah, it's coming up. And obviously, like Primer, anybody that's from St. Louis, and I would even say the Midwest, there's a big connection with Primer 55, being from Memphis, I think, for the most part, and St. Louis specifically Pops, because they recorded the Loose video at Pops. So to kind of come back and do that, it's sort of, to me anyway, it seems like a full circle moment.
Yeah, I got to play Pops with Primer maybe a year or two after the Loose video was put out. But yeah, Primer 55 in the Midwest are like go hand in hand. And even when we got the new booking agent, I was on the phone with the booking agent, and they were like, "What markets are you guys big in?" And the first thing that popped out of my brain was like Des Moines, and it's funny because anytime we would hit the Midwest, it was like it would just sell out or be a packed out crowd, and then we would get to the West Coast or East Coast, and it would dwindle down. But yeah, the Primer and the Midwest, man, go hand in hand. But yeah, Primer was based out of Memphis. I grew up in Nashville. Bobby, lived in Louisville for a while, so it's kind of an amalgamation of just everywhere around us, I guess.
Yeah, and with this tour, obviously, I think it's pretty well known that Bobby has recently had some health issues, and it sounded like I think maybe in the press release or some of the press that you've been doing is that's one of the reasons that you guys wanted to do this was because he was, I guess, feeling a little bit better and his health was
Yeah.
in a better state, and you guys wanted to get out there and celebrate this.
Yeah, it's over the last, I started Talk To Me 10 years ago, like 10-year anniversary just popped up. And over the years, 10 years ago, Primer, it was cool, but it wasn't like a thing. And then over the years, I would have guests on, younger guys on, and they'd be like, "Oh man, we jammed Primer in middle school," and it was always like a swell of people talking about Primer. And Bobby, for the last 10 years or so, has kind of just been out of the loop. And I would always tell him, I'm like, "Dude, I interviewed this guy today, and he talked about being a Primer fan," and it got to a point where I started seeing other bands on the big festivals that were kind of in the same ilk as Primer, and kind of the resurgence of new metal popping up, and I'd been bugging him about just doing a show for a couple of years, and then we would think about it, and then he gave me the go ahead one time to kind of book a show, and we tried to do it in Atlanta, and it just nothing came of it. And sometime last year, he reached out to me and he said, if this certain girl calls you and says that I've passed away, I want you to be the one to break the news. And I'm like, dude, don't put that on me. Like, I don't want that. I don't want to be the one to have to break the news, because he was having so many issues, internally, with the lifestyle that he had kind of lived over the years, and, some liver stuff. And they had kind of just said, it was pretty bleak. And then I guess when he kind of told the story, I heard it the other day, and we've talked a little bit about it, but he had went to the doctor and they were like, finally, like, "Oh shit, like you need surgery now, and it's not even a surgery we can do at this hospital." So they sent him to Dallas, and like they immediately just basically said, "We have to do the surgery now." And they fixed him up, and he kind of, that he had drained so much fluid from his lungs, and he said he lost like 30 pounds, like, and it's also being a dude and not going to the doctor. And he said for a long time that he was having some bad intestinal pains, but it's just that whole, like, "Oh, I'm just going to, toughen it out and go through the next day." But yeah, man, he kind of came out the other side of all this and kind of hit me up and said, "Hey, let's do a show." And I was like, "All right." And this is when Snot had just kind of come back around, and Mikey Doling had been on the podcast a ton, and just friendly over the years, and talked off mic and things like that. And I just hit him up and I was like, "Hey man, who's booking your shows?" Because they were getting on festivals, they were getting on this. Kind of the same similarity in the band, lead singer passed away, a couple of records back in the day, and kind of similar situation. I think Snots might be, regarded a little bit better. They came out a little bit earlier, and definitely were a little bit more on the forefront of the new metal scene. But yes, Mikey just immediately, threw me an email address, and I hit up the guy, and it's like, it was either going to be, "I have no idea who you guys are," or "Let's do this." And luckily, I was like, "Hey, would you like to book a 25th anniversary of Primer 55 show?" And they were like, "Absolutely." And the show turned into a weekend, which turned into a week, which turned into, we're going to go on tour in November with Smile Empty Soul for, 3 weeks. And then we're going to go, we're about to announce some stuff, soon for next year. And it's just like some of the stuff coming through, man. It's really wild. I mean, if you listen to like old episodes of the podcast, I talk about this before Jason passed away, and I was just like, man, I would love for Bobby and Jason to get in a room and just play. Like those guys needed to play together, and I'm really sad that he's not here for this, because Jason would be over the moon for the reception that this 25th anniversary stuff's getting, for the legacy that kind of Primer built over the years. People cared about it. I think it's one of those things where it went away for so long that it kind of gradually built, behind the scenes. There are certain bands that came out 25 years ago that are popping back up, and Primer was always one of those bands. It was like, if there was like a 50 greatest new metal albums of all time list, Primer's going to be about 42, and so I mean, I think people are excited, and I'm excited to get in a room and play with these guys again. And honestly, just with Bobby's health, I mean, I never thought he would get on stage again. I never thought, there was a point where I never thought I'd see him again or talk to him again. So, so this is going to be amazing just to get in a room and play and get these songs back out and go back out on tour, man. I haven't toured in 18 years, so I'm excited to do this again.
And Jason's obviously the voice of Primer 55, but Bobby, I don't know if, and maybe I'm just sort of naive to it. I don't know if Bobby ever got the credit because Bobby did so much of the writing and even played multiple instruments on the albums, particularly.
Oh yeah.
I'm good friends with Marcus Harrington from Relative Ash, and I know him and Bobby were really close. And Mark would always tell me these stories like, dude, Bobby's a genius. And I don't know if he fully gets the credit that he deserved. And I even mentioned in our text when we were texting back and forth that like the first album sounds like 1999 or 2000, when it came out. But the second album, also underrated. There was so many different sounds that they explored. There's some like reggae on Texas, and there's some punk rock. And then there's the poppy side with This Life and the single. Can you talk about like Bobby's contribution to Primer? Like there wouldn't be a Primer without Bobby, right?
No, totally not. It's funny you brought that up because Bobby and I did a band after Primer that it was like after Primer and then up until he joined Soulfly, like we were kind of doing some stuff in the studio and I've been around a ton of musicians in my life and been in other bands and been around some of the greatest players I've ever, that you could be around. And I remember one day we were just in the studio and he goes, I think I'm going to put a solo right here. And Bobby's not known for his solos and things like that, but he just picked up the guitar and a solo came out and it was one take perfect. And that was another thing too, is I've always said over the years, I mean, Bobby needs to be on stage. Bobby needs to be in studio. Bobby needs to be writing songs. Like that's what he does. And it's not even, he writes like you said, like Introduction to Mayhem, super rap metal, super new metal album. The new release, all over the place, experimental, like kind of getting away from that, but they both have their charm. And when I first joined the band, like I just specifically focused in on the songs that I needed to learn for the set. And a couple of years ago with the Roach Coach podcast, I jumped on and we did a breakdown of the new release. And so there's some songs later in the album that I hadn't listened to in forever. And you're just like, man, what the hell was Bobby thinking? You got horn sections and everything else. But yeah, both records, he plays guitar, he plays bass. Basically nobody has recorded a note on a Primer 55 album that's not Bobby Burns. And yeah, I mean, even the, Jason's contribution to the band, I remember, Bobby really pushing Jason and trying to get the best out of him. And Jason was a, gentle giant kind of thing, big dude, probably very intimidating. Actually, I mean, I guess I met him, prior to joining the band, very intimidating dude. But like once you got into the band, you got around him. I mean, he was quiet, reserved. I don't know any, I was in the band for a long time with him and don't know anything about him just because he was quiet to himself. He would walk around backstage and do this, some vocal warm-ups would be like, doing running scales or da, 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 like all that stuff. And he would just walk backstage like, rah, just screaming, like just to get his like throat warm. And then he would go out and kill it. But yeah, man, I really sad that those two guys never really, they did bury the hatchet later. I think Jason had actually done maybe a couple of Primer shows, maybe 10 years or so ago, roughly towards that end of the band kind of deal. But yeah, man, I love Donny to death. I've known Donny forever, the DRP current singer, but yeah, would love to see Jason up there. And Donny's the same way. Donny said it in podcast too. Like Donny's like, yeah, like I would love to see it too. So I think it's going to be awesome to get out there and kind of, tributize Jason with these shows and and hopefully, this is going to be a fun time out there.
You kind of mentioned, some of this like revitalization and I guess maybe appreciation of new metal. And sometimes that can come with nostalgia, for guys like me that was in my teenage years. But I will say too is like, sometimes new metal gets this, no pun intended, this like bad rap of having all this like toxic masculinity. And what I will say is, and I've definitely at shows maybe seen some of that stuff, but I will say it's one of the funnest shows to go to. Something like a new metal show, you think it has all this like aggression and anger, and I think it also about the, and I want to get your thoughts on the Woodstock 99 documentary. I don't know if you saw it or not. And I wasn't there, but I was there, it was the time that I was going to shows. So some of those things I did see, and some of it was not right. Do not get me wrong, but it just put it in such a negative light that there was so much positive. Even now, with this Pantera reunion, me and Anthony a couple years ago went and seen them in Indianapolis, and
I was at that show. Yeah,
you were at that show.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen so many happy people in my life. You could go to Disney World and not see that many happy people. In fact, you see the opposite.
Yeah, it was crazy. There was like mosh pits in the seats. We had seats in the aisle. I mean, there were people like, old guys like us. They were just in there like, they had to get that aggression out. I mean, it kind of revitalized that youth.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that show a ton on the podcast over the years, and it's like, we got there early. It was, people in the parking lot throwing the football, grilling out, pre-gaming with their beers, whatnot. And even walking into the venue, just hearing people's conversation around me, people driving from Cleveland, driving from St. Louis, driving from everywhere around the country. Because I mean, I think that was that was early on. That was like third, fourth show of the run. So I mean, people were pumped, and as much hate as this reunion, celebration, whatever you want to call it, has gotten over the last couple of years, everybody in that place had the time of their life. I remember, I mean, like I had a few drinks in me, and like when they came out, and like I was like, my wife's laughing at me. I got tears in my eyes, like, because I saw Pantera probably 12 times back in the day, but I never thought I would see it again. I get that it's not, Dime and Vinny and all that stuff, but I mean, as for Pantera, lights, fire, the songs, just everything else, like it was a Pantera show as much as you could get in 2020, was 3 or 24, whatever that was. And I'm sitting there. The funny thing is the guy in the row ahead of me never said a word to me the entire show, and never, it's not like we broed down up until Pantera. He kept trying to show me his phone with setlist.fm on it. And I was like, I do not want to see the set list. I was like, I made it a point. I didn't want to see it on my phone. I didn't want to read it on, the PRP or Blabbermouth. Like, it was the weirdest thing, because I told my wife, I was making it a point that I just wanted to be surprised. And out of nowhere, this dude just kept showing me his phone. And I'm like, dude, I swear to God, I'm about to knock that phone out of your hands, man. But yeah, man, after the show, walking out, everyone was smiling, laughing, having a good time, talking about how great it was. And I think I've seen it. I've seen it 3 times total since it's kind of been back around. And it's definitely not been as good as the first one. I don't know if it's like, when they talk about like heroin and things like that, you never get that first high that you got. But I mean, it's been great every time I've seen it. And I like that they're adding more songs to the set and all that stuff. But as I guess I really can't, shit on a band, going out without original members that have passed away if I'm going to be in Primer 55.
Well, I follow you online, and do you want to talk about that helmet that I think is behind you there? Because I've seen you talk about that, and I know that's pretty special to you.
Yeah, that was from the Vinnie Paul estate sale. And I'm a massive Titans fan, unfortunately, this year. Jesus Christ. But I'm a massive Titans fan, and I know he was a big football fan and things like that. And when they announced that they were doing the estate auction, I just was kind of skimming through it, and I just happened to see a Tennessee Titans helmet, and I'm like, well, if anybody's going to own Vinnie Paul's Tennessee Titans helmet, it better be me. And it's funny. I think I was the only one that bid on it. So I got it for the opening bid price, but I mean, it was still a nice chunk of change with the shipping and auction fees and things like that. But it was a wild auction, because the auction, like, say it was going to end at 1 p.m., but the rules of the auction was, it was going to go on until 10 minutes after the final bid on any item. So like if there was something you guys wanted that was a t-shirt, that would just keep going with the bidding until I don't think it ended until like 6 p.m. So I was just nervous that someone was going to like swoop in and throw a bid on it and get it out from under me. But yeah, man, I've been looking online for photos of like a Vinnie Paul game room or something, or the sports room with, you know, like helmets lined up or something like that. But it's an actual, it's not game used, but it's like game worthy or whatever helmet. Like it's, you know, all the you know, logos on it and tags on it and everything else. Like it's a full on, you know, game, could be game used helmet if it was going to be used kind of deal.
Do they call that game issued? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Is that your most prized piece right there? In your metal collection?
So. Yeah, I guess so. I really haven't thought about that, but yeah, I guess. Yeah, that. I mean, I've got some you know, Pantera autographs around here. I've got you know, I got to meet them a bunch when I was a kid. You know, that's kind of where the podcast probably started in the 90s for me, because I was that kid that stood outside the bus. I was the kid that, you know, somehow weaseled my way backstage or got a backstage pass or something. And I always really tried, even at like 13 and 14, to go in and speak to an artist and not just ask them something dumb like, you know, where did the band name come from or something like that. I would always like try to find something personal or something like that, at least to get one good answer or one good question in on them. And so I think that's kind of carried over into, you know, I've always been a fan. I mean, obviously Primer getting back together and going back out is awesome. And, you know, getting to tour and all that stuff is great. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a fan. And like, that's mainly the podcast. You know, the podcast is, I always say it's like my record collection come to life. You know, that's why one week it'll be a dude from Obituary and the next week it's a dude from Limp Bizkit. And, you know, you've got so many different avenues of musicians coming on, because it's not just a new metal podcast. It's not just a this or that. It's 99.9% guests that I want to have on with those, you know, favors added on in there in between.
Can we throw a few podcast questions at you?
Yeah, man.
Have you ever been stood up, and how many times did the drummer from Alien Ant Farm stand you up?
Never been stood. Well, let me think. No, stood up. Well, yeah, I have been stood up once, and I will hold a grudge. Like, you know,
well, that was going to be my follow-up.
Yeah.
Is like, at what point do you be like, you know, no?
Yeah. It was one time the guest, I think this is back when I was still doing phone interviews, and I called the guest at the, you know, 7 p.m. or whatever time it was exactly, and they were driving, and they're like, "Hey, let me call you back." Never called back, and yeah, so I've been offered that guest a few times since then, and I'm like, yeah, I'll pass. You know,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most blatant, like, you know, where they answered the phone and it wasn't just a scheduling mishap or something like that. You know, I've had a couple of, you know, people forgetting or the publicist didn't get it to the manager who did get it to the thing, you know, like all that stuff. That stuff's happens every once in a while, but like a full on getting stood up for an interview, I think probably only happened once.
That's pretty impressive, because it seems like it happens to us a lot.
Well, I stopped doing, like, I don't know if you guys do a ton of just reaching out directly to the person. Like, I started out doing that a lot early on, but yeah, I think now I typically try to go through publicists if possible, just because I work with so many publicists now that if they see you kind of trying to snake around them, you know, they might put a bad taste in their mouth. And even if I'm friendly with the person, I'll still at least hit the publicist up and say, hey, you know, I was texting with them and it came up that they want to do an interview this time, and just kind of get it on the books and make sure that it's kind of legit and not, you know, because it's funny being on this side of the band, being on the podcast side for 10 years. And then now being on this side of the band, like seeing our Facebook inbox and our Twitter inbox and our Instagram inbox. It's like all these dudes coming out of nowhere with podcasts I've never heard of. And I'm like, all right, like, let's do it. But it's just funny. Now I know how I probably have seemed to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, I just always try to, like, if I ever hit somebody up, cold hit them up, I'd always be like, hey man, would like to have you on my podcast. I've had this person, this person, this person on, and if you're into it, let's do it. Try to give it some validity and not just like too much of a pitch.
Yeah, and we're the same way. We typically won't reach out directly to the person. One, it doesn't seem to work all that much, at least for us anyway. But two, and it's probably some of the same publicists that you have good relationship with, the Atom Splitters, the Ear Splits, and I think developing those good relationships and doing good work and, being timely, even though Anthony wasn't. But yeah, I think that goes a long way. And I will say this, because we do some other podcasting as well. It's not just the Vulgar Display of Podcast. It is, we've probably done hundreds at this point. It is amazing to me how often people are just, they don't have to do our little old podcast. We're not going to give them some exposure that they don't have already. But how nice and considerate and appreciative people are, other than Jeremy Piven, other than him, the actor, the Entourage guy. Other than him, it's been so cool seeing just people, be receptive to talking to, goober heads like us or fans, kind of like you were saying.
Yeah, I think the metal community is, a breed of its own. Like we're happy that people want to talk to us, kind of thing. The only, you brought up a funny story, or reminded me of a funny story. I interviewed Jake the Snake Roberts, and it was one, and that was totally like I happened to follow him on Facebook, and like his daughter popped up as his manager, so I emailed her, and she set this up, and I think he thought he was doing like a 5-minute radio hit. So where I had like a half-hour podcast, ready to go. And we got about 5 minutes into the talk, and he goes, all right, man, well, it's been a good talking to you. And then just hung up. I was just like, oh, all right. Like, so, I mean, but it's Jake the Snake Roberts. What are you going to do, man? Very, very rarely do I kind of go outside the music circle, but, I always try to find, somebody that has like a musical tie, something. I mean, like one of the most random ones I did was David Thibodeau. He was one of the Branch Davidians with the Waco nonsense, but he was David Koresh's drummer. So I actually reached out to him, and I was like, hey, he had actually done some other bands throughout the years and things like that. And so I just reached out to him. I was like, I don't really want to talk about the whole religion thing and the Waco nonsense. I'm like, let's just talk about music. And he's like, and I had just got done with that Waco miniseries. I was in it, because, when I was 12, 13, 14, I mean, that was one of the biggest events up to that point in my life, like that was a pivotal moment with that whole, with the Waco stuff. And that one on YouTube, it's just audio. But that one gets the weirdest comments from people coming in and, not knowing who I am, not knowing what's going on. But I got to talk to him about David Koresh's guitar style. How was he a good guitar player? What was he into? And, all this nonsense. So, yeah, I'll randomly have some weird guests on, but I try to keep it to the rock and metal world.
What's been your personal favorite get? Like, holy crap, I just got this person and I'm now talking to them.
Jason Newsted from obviously Metallica, but they were doing 30th anniversary of the Black Album, and that was one of those deals where Black Album came out 91. I'm 12 years old. I had gotten into Kiss and some other stuff as a kid, but like when Metallica popped up, in my world, I mean, obviously Enter Sandman and all that stuff, like I was blown away. I was like, what is this band? And then I obviously went back and got into all the stuff prior to that. But when they were doing just a little bit of press for the 30th anniversary box set for the Black Album, and I just kind of lucked up, and right day, right time. emailed the right person, and then boom, there's Jason Newsted like on my screen, and I got to talk to him for an hour, and he was so nice. You know, I was joking with him that I had met him in 1994, and I told him at the time that I was a bass player also, and he was signing a shirt that I was wearing. And he leaned back and he stabbed me with the Sharpie, and it was a friend of mine's shirt because I had worn my Megadeth shirt to the Metallica show.
Ooh.
And so last minute.
On purpose, or a rookie move?
Yeah. No, it was on purpose.
Okay.
That was like I guess my lucky shirt back then. Like, cause you have a lot of photos of me and musicians, I'm wearing that shirt, you know, picture of me and Dimebag, picture of me and Bobby from Overkill. Like I don't know. I guess I just thought it was a good luck charm. And so that night we were about to leave, and looking back on it now, it's funny, but my friend's mom somehow got us a bunch of backstage passes. So, you know, however that happened. So I got to go back, and we met Lars and James and Jason that night. But I didn't want to go back wearing the Megadeth shirt. So my friend, he bought a white Metallica shirt at the show. He's like, you can wear this, but you have to get it signed. And I was like, all right, deal. You know, so I go back and got to talk to him and stuff. But yeah, Jason Newsted's probably my craziest yet. And honestly, you know, I mean, even doing the podcast, you know, with David Ellefson now, I mean, that's a wild one for me, just because what got me into playing bass was Cliff, Jason Newsted, David Ellefson, you know, like those dudes. And man, the first time I interviewed David Ellefson was like, I think it's like episode 38, I think, of the podcast, you know, like early in the thing. And I got 20 minutes with him. And I remember like just the anxiety of because back then it was all, I did everything through my phone, just, you know, audio only podcast. And so I was like, and all of a sudden, you know, the phone rings and you're like, you know, like you got to answer it, and you like freak out, you know? And so now like doing a podcast with him is wild. Like, but you know, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I bet so. Do you ever like take a moment and like look back and say, wow, look how far this has come? And I know a lot of hard work goes into it, and you're so consistent with your content. You do such a good job of it, and we're fans. So do you ever get a chance to kind of look back at it and go, wow, this has really, you know, become something?
You know, it's only when I need to go find something on the podcast, or maybe go find a clip about something or whatever else, where you kind of have to scroll through your guests, you know, because I mean, you guys are probably the same way, where like right now you're talking to me, but you're already on to the next episode. You know, like, all right, we got to interview this guy next, and this one's released, and you just kind of keep going. And so anytime I do like a anniversary show or something like that, where I can kind of just scroll through and look at the names that have been on the show, it's wild to kind of look back and just see who I've talked to, who's, you know, I was just at Louder Than Life, you know, doing some media stuff, and other musicians talking about checking out the show, or just even knowing me because of the show, you know, like so it's definitely unexpected. I always thought I would put out the podcast and my friends would listen to it. And what I found out is my friends don't listen to it. And it's for like, I actually have an audience that listens to it. You know, like the friends will check out the first couple of episodes, but they're like, all right, yeah, good with this. Yeah. We're good. We'll move on now.
Well, I will say, and I know you've interviewed him a ton of times, but Max Cavalera was, I would say, our first interviewer. I would say all of us in the room were like, this is Max on the phone. At the time, we weren't doing video, so it was sort of like you're talking about, where it's the phone call and you look down and it says Cavalera. You know, it's probably Gloria Cavalera.
Right.
But man, you know, when they say never to meet your idols, and Max, I hold Max, and I imagine you guys do too, very high on the metal, you know, list.
Oh, totally.
And we've interviewed him a few times since, and actually Anthony saw him last night for the Chaos AD tour. And Gloria has been such a awesome person for us and nice for us. But yeah, when that happens, you know, as the interviewer, and you get to talk to your idols, it can be a little bit of a pinch yourself moment because like I said, it's like when he answered the phone or when he was calling, it took the whole air out of the room in a good way.
Right.
And then to follow up where he's just such a sweetheart of a guy, you know, you love that. You love when that happens. I'm sure you've experienced that a ton.
Dude, I mean, honestly, I think I've interviewed Max probably more than anybody else just because he's constantly doing something and it's constantly like if a Max Cavalera thing pops up in my email, if it's, you know, Go Ahead and Die, if it's Cavalera, if it's Soulfly, if it's, you know, whatever he's doing, I always, my initial thing is always like interview ? You know, like, and they're like, yeah, we'll get it on there. And then I'll look back and I just interviewed him like 4 months ago. And I'm like, oh shit. But the one thing that's nice about some of the interviews I've got to do, it always seems like I get to interview him when they're doing the, you know, first time I got to interview him, I think they were doing Return to Roots, and then they're doing something about, you know, doing the Nail Bomb record, and then they're doing a Rise, and then they're doing, you know, now they're doing Chaos AD, and so you don't have to kind of fudge on the interview and talk about, oh man, the new album is great, but hey, tell me about Territory, you know, or something like that. You don't have to sneak in a question that you really want to know. If they're doing a tour based around Chaos AD, I could just straight Chaos AD questions, you know, where the, you know, like the things that you want to do, you know, getting to do the Return to Roots episode with him and just getting to, like, you know, tell me about working with Ross Robinson, talk about, you know, burying the tapes and all the, you know, all that stuff that to do with the album. So it's just nice to get to talk to dudes like Max. And even, you know, what's funny is when Bobby joined Soulfly, him and I were doing a band at the time, like a post Primer. We were doing some stuff. He had a home studio. I was going over to his house all the time, recording stuff. And I remember I was sitting there and he got the email or he got the call or something, like when I was in the room, and he goes, I think they want me to join Soulfly. What do you think about that? I'm like, what do you mean? What do I think about it? I was like, if you don't do it, I'm doing it, you know, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, did it suck that, you know, Bobby left to go do Soulfly? Yes. Was it awesome that Bobby left to go do Soulfly? Yes. You know, to get to see your friend up there playing bass and, you know, basically one of your favorite bands. And, you know, he ended up doing 4 albums with them. And we actually did a Primer tour. My last Primer tour was 2007, and that was kind of in the middle of his Soulfly stuff. So it was Mark Rizzo was opening, like Mark Rizzo's solo band was opening for Primer. So it was like a whole Soulfly night. You know, Mark would do Soulfly tunes, and I haven't actually asked him yet. I need to, you know, down the road, once we kind of get into the more, if we continue to do more Primer stuff, I'm like, dude, we need to sneak in like a Soulfly song, like, so, you know, maybe something, you know, like Prophecy or like something that he was on, you know, something from his era. I think would be fun to kind of sneak in, you know.
Well, there's some good stuff on that era that you're talking about. Yeah, there's some really good tunes on that Soulfly, those couple albums that you're talking about. Hey, I do have one more podcast question, and we'll definitely get back to the Primer stuff. But you kind of said something that made me think about. Do you ever get asked not to talk about certain subjects? And obviously you honor that because you want to be respectful, but in what way do you honor that? Do you turn down the interview, or do you honor that to the point where you stick to what they want to talk about?
I've been asked not to talk about things. Yeah. And I'll, depending on the guest, you know, if it's a Max Cavalera, I mean, honestly, Max is someone that's happened with, you know, they say, don't talk about Sepultura. And I'll be like, okay. And then I'll be like, hey, Max, how's it going? And he'd be like, oh, you know, this time when I was in Sepultura. And I'm like, you know, you know, and so, yeah, there have been a few times where, yeah, don't talk about this, don't ask about that. And then the guest has brought it up. And I'm just like, well, what the hell, you know? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I think I try to be respectful in a lot of those ways. I mean, I interviewed Joey Jordison years ago, before he passed away, for his band Sinsanium, I think it was called. And I got like half an hour with him, and they said, you know, no Slipknot questions. And I was like, all right. So I did like a whole half hour, you know, we talked about his time in Korn, his time with Rob Zombie, the new album and all this other stuff. Actually, that was one I had to go back and listen to because I was around the time, it might have been an anniversary of his death or something, but I wanted to pull some audio from that and kind of throw it up on the socials. And I was listening to that interview again. And the very end of it, he's like, "Hey man, call me anytime you need anything, blah, blah, blah." And it was like really nice and really sweet. And even, Adam Splitter PR, I think Amy over at Adam Splitter was the one that booked that. And she even like said, "Thank you for not," like he said to her that I didn't ask any Slipknot questions because no matter how many times, she said, no matter how many times she told people not to ask Slipknot questions, they still said to ask Slipknot questions. So I tried to, maybe you see it as a challenge, you see it as a challenge not to see if you could do a full half hour with a guy that was in one of the biggest metal bands of all time and see if you can, keep it going and talk about, different things.
Yeah. And we've definitely participated in interviews like that where it's to stay away from this one thing that's like what they're mostly known for. And it is a
Right.
challenge. And sometimes I'd be like, man, and not that, we're not looking for headlines. We're not looking for any kind of drama, but it's just hard not to bring up Slipknot to Joey.
Yeah, right.
I imagine we never got to interview him, but it's like, because do you consider yourself like a music journalist in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think I would definitely consider myself, a music journalist. I think it's funny, like right now, I kind of feel like a podcaster playing in a band rather than a musician doing a podcast, and even I did media at Louder Than Life a couple weekends ago or last weekend or whatever the hell that was, and so I was seeing some guys that I'll be touring with, so I'm like having to be like musician brain, but then I'm also interviewing people, so I got to be like the interviewer guy, and it's I don't know, man. I hope that I can compartmentalize both of them and make them work together. And I'm excited to kind of get out on tour and do some road diary type stuff and get out there and do some podcasting. Whoever I run, and if I run into people at the shows or playing with a certain band here and there, or something like that, getting and doing some stuff. But yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think it's like right now, I definitely feel like a music journalist that got to be in a band again.
Yeah, we always kind of, it's like, are we entertainment? Are we journalists? And it seems like sometimes we're a little bit of both because we do, we'll do photography at shows, we do show reviews, we do album reviews. So like there's, I think, some journalistic, ethics that are involved in that, or, and if we're really considering ourselves music journalists, then sometimes we need to be asking the difficult questions, but obviously being respectful of it too. So that's always kind of an area that I don't really even know what to consider, what we do. It might be different from what you do. I will say this, that Pops in the upper deck, the second level, they actually have a studio up there, sort of on the stage side. If you would want to do any kind of like podcasting of your own there, they have a perfect spot for it.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get back to Pops. I think we're going to do, I think we're looking at, having a photographer out to do we actually have to do some promo photos and things like that. Because honestly, with the whole Primer thing getting back together, we still have not been in a room together. Bobby's still in Texas. I'm still in Louisville. Our drummer's in Indy. And our singer's in Wisconsin. So it's like, but we leave, I leave here a week from tomorrow to go up to Wisconsin for rehearsals for we're going to, I've been playing more bass in the last 2 months than I probably did my entire life prior to this, just because, I want this to be great. And I want to show up prepared. I definitely, looking at it in a much different way. I was 23 when I joined Primer to begin with, and I did not take it as serious as I should have back then. Like I was like, all right, sweet, I'm in the band. Like I'll figure it out. And I think it also comes from my band prior to Primer, I started when I was 17, and I basically did it all the way up until Primer. So I never really had to like go into another scenario and learn other people's songs and I was so used to writing and just muscle memory my own songs that I just assumed that would happen when I joined the new band, and that's not what happened. I remember I was like, we had, all right. So my timeline with Primer is I met them in 2000, like right when the Introduction to Mayhem came out. My old drummer and we were out following the Sick and Twisted tour, which was Korn and Stained. And we were handing out CDs or selling CDs. And, I think we were selling them for like $5 a piece. And we would make enough basically to get a hotel room and gas money to get to the next city. And that's what we were doing. We were just, trying to, because our guitar player at the time had like a for real job and he couldn't tour. So we were like, all right, well, if we can't tour, then we'll just go spread the word. I mean, this is like, the internet is still in its infancy and all this other nonsense. So
real quick, was that 12-volt negative earth?
Yeah, 12-volt negative earth. Yeah.
Which I'm familiar. I didn't know, I was familiar with you guys, I think back then. Did you guys play St. Louis a few times?
Yeah, we played the Galaxy and Pops.
Creepy Crawl.
I don't think we ever played the Creepy Crawl. I know we played the Galaxy. Like, I think we even headlined the Galaxy at one point. Like, I think there was like with 12-volt, there was a couple of markets that like we became, we headlined in New Orleans and we could headline like Memphis and we could headline St. Louis and Nashville, obviously. But yeah, I mean, St. Louis was like a home away from home for a long time because, we were trading shows with Big Blue Monkey and Low Cash and all those guys back then. Yeah. And yeah, it was like,
was there also a Shun connection?
Yeah. Like Shun was, just they were kind of like our
brother
like
band or something.
They were like the Deftones Star Korn kind of thing, like they were a little bit more, obviously a little bit more. I think that might be one of the first times I heard you guys because I think you guys interviewed Billy.
Yeah, man, what a great band.
Yeah. So
awesome
12 volts drummer Richie was Shun's original drummer. He was on the early stuff, the more new metal Shun stuff. Not the
Michael and Rain.
Not Michael and Rain. That was like Jack, I think his name was. But yeah, Richie was on like the what was that album called? Promising, I think it was called, like the first Shun CD. But yeah, so I mean honestly, I remember they actually played with us at like some crappy club and they originally were called Creep. And they got off stage and I was like, you can't be called Creep. That was like one of the Korn's original names or something. And then they changed their name to Shun. But yeah, we used to play a ton with those guys. Yeah, so Shun, actually it was funny. I found a Shun shirt at the Goodwill in Tennessee because I still go back a lot. And I bought it and I took a picture and I sent it to Billy or Richie, their bass player or something. I was like, is this a real Shun shirt? And they're like, no, there's a new Shun out of like North Carolina that's that's kind of popping up now. But I was like, because it was funny because I found a Teen Idol shirt, which they were a Nashville like punk band, and I found that Shun shirt like the same day. I was like, man, I got the local band trifecta, like the double dip over here. But no, yeah, Shun was great. We used to play a ton with Shun back in the day. But yeah, we would go to St. Louis and play with there was Big Blue Monkey, there was Low Cash. Trying to think, there was a band that we played before that.
Did you ever play with Fifth Element?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There was
they were a pretty popular new metal band in the St. Louis area at that time.
Man, it's driving me nuts. I can't think of the band that kind of introduced us to St. Louis. That was like 96, 97. 97, I think, is when we did our first kind of out of town shows.
Like Disturbing the Peace. There was.
Man, it's gonna break my head.
Wasn't Calico, was it?
Calico
I don't think so. No. But it'll come to me at some point. But just kind of the long story short of it all, man, I remember playing, those old Low Cash and Big Blue Monkey. We loved Big Blue Monkey. Like we they were like Deftones with like Journey singing. It was really weird. It was like kind of punky and kind of everything. And I remember like specifically remember them moving to California, and they're like, they were going to move out there and make it. And then they were thanked in the first Finch record. Like Finch thanked Big Blue Monkey in their record. And I can vividly remember being at the rehearsal space going, they fucking made it. And like looking back on it, that's such a trivial thing. But yeah, they got thanked in that record, and then they come out with Page Avenue, and it was just over with, man. I got to see them on that tour with like My Chemical Romance open for them. It was crazy. Got to see them over the years, and obviously, and I'm still close with Adam, their bass player, and text with him a lot. He actually has a great podcast. He's a killer podcaster, Star Wars podcast, but it's a good podcast. Called what is this podcast called? I don't know, but actually I have a few friends that do Star Wars podcasts, so they're all run together. But Thank the Maker is his podcast, but he does a really good, really cool. It's like him and like one of the dudes from like Yellow Card and somebody else from some other pop punk band, but they don't talk about music at all. Like they all just nerd out on Star Wars. And but I got to see. It's funny. I saw Dan and Adam at Louder Than Life. Did some stuff with them, and it's like, when was the last time we saw you? And I'm like, man, I think it was like 2009 or 10, something crazy. Like I hadn't seen them in person, man. But and that's another band, that was popular, took a dip, came back just bigger than ever. Like they crushed Louder Than Life. I was, I'm so proud of those guys just because I was there when they were trying to be what they became. And, they weren't put together. They weren't manufactured, anything like that. Like those dudes worked hard, and, Ryan's an incredible guitar player. And actually it was 12 volt. We put out the first album as a 5-piece. We fired our guitar player, and I begged Ryan to join the band. I called him. We were on the phone for like 45 minutes, and I'm just like trying to sell him on the idea of joining 12 Volt Negative Earth. And, I probably was just like, the band's not going anywhere, something like that. I was trying so hard to get him to join the band, because he even back then he was just ripping.
Oh yeah, shredding, but like doing it in a not a cheesy way, a very delicate way, I would say. But you could tell the dude could play. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So I mean, St. Louis has always held a nice little place in my heart, And actually, the first time we played Pops with 12 Volt, we actually opened for Cinderella because Fred Corey, drummer of Cinderella, produced the first 12 Volt demos, because when I was in high school in 1996, that was like my senior year going, I graduated in 97. So somewhere in there, 96, I lived in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It's right outside Nashville, famous for Taylor Swift now. And Johnny Cash lived there, and, Conway Twitty. And actually, I actually physically went to high school with Diplo. We were friends back then. But
wow.
So I went to this used record store like after school every day. And the guy that worked there, I'm still friends with today, but he was, he had opened this store. He probably only in his 20s back then. But, when you're 16, this older guy was just the wealth of knowledge. And we would just sit there and talk music, and just talk about certain things, and talk music, talk about Kiss, and just that kind of every day I'd kind of stop by and just talk to this guy. And he goes, Fred Corey from Cinderella was just in here. And I'm like, no shit. And he's like, yeah, he just moved to town, built a studio. He's recording bands. And I'm like, and I just joined what became 12 Volt Negative Earth. And I'm like, well, I got a band, And we gave him some shitty 8-track demo that we had done. And Fred liked it. And Fred recorded us for free for God knows how long. So we were out the gates getting like massive studio quality demos.
Wow.
With Fred's kind of name on it. And so when we booked our first tour, and we had like an off day, and I called him for some reason, and he's like, if you can make it to St. Louis by this certain time, you guys can open the show tonight. So we just hauled ass to Pops, and that was a sold out show at Pops. I mean, that was, Cinderella kind of coming back around, and and they didn't know what to do with us, obviously. I mean, we were like a new metal Life of Agony, we were a lot heavier than anything that they were doing. But yeah, it was that Pops has always been a cool place, man. Like it's I played there with Primer, played there with 12 Volt. I can't wait to kind of get back to that area.
Yeah, and you're going to be playing there again Thursday, October 10th, the 25 years, which is crazy to think about, of Introduction to Mayhem. I remember when that record came out. That's crazy. Doors are at 6, shows at 7, Primer 55, and with Bobby Burns, Josh, Donny, and Preston, and, doing this in Jason's honor, I'm sure.
Yeah, man. That was one thing, too, kind of getting the band back together. I mean, I wasn't the first bass player, but I wanted, I think through the podcast, I kind of kept the name alive, and I'm very associated with Primer. I remember one day I got tagged in something that had nothing to do with me with Primer, and a friend / listener of the podcast he like commented, he's like, I've never seen like the third bass player of a band become so synonymous with the band. I'm like, well, I guess it happens. But yeah, I mean, I wanted Preston involved. He was, came in on the new release, and I, toured with him back in 2002, and just to kind of get as much of as classic of a lineup as possible. Sans the vocalist. So I think it's gonna be fun, man, to get back in a room with these guys and get back out on the road and get to St. Louis. And honestly, like, of all the shows of this first little like 7-date run, I mean, everybody's like, I'm going to Pops. Like, yeah. I mean, that's the one show, people are driving in from like, all around to come see the show. So I'm excited to get there.
Yeah. And then you have this 7-day run. And then is it November, you guys go out with Smile Empty Soul.
Yeah.
That's a little bit longer of a run. You're out for over a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, I think it's the 1st through like the 23rd. Yeah, it's basically starts at the Machine Shop in Flint, which is, new metal haven up there. So I think that's going to be a massive show. Speaking of Pops, and even on this first run, I mean, I think we started the Bottleneck. I mean, these places I played 30 years ago are still around. But
classic Midwest right there. The Bottleneck, Pops.
Yeah, basically, I'm sure you're like how I am. If you see a couple of cities, you think the tour might come to your town. So I'm sure if you see the Bottleneck, you're like, all right, we're probably 2 days before, 2 days after, like somewhere in there. But yeah, played the Bottleneck years ago with like Pissing Razors, and yeah, man, I'm just so yeah, we playing the Machine Shop, and then we actually go out and play the Whiskey. I never played the Whiskey, so that's gonna be awesome, playing in Hollywood and kind of getting back out that way, and then going through. I think we're going to try to do like a in-person podcast with David Ellison when I get out there, because he's going to be home when we play in Mesa, Arizona. So I think we're going to try to hook up and actually do a sit-down live podcast, since we've been doing all these Zoom ones for the last however long. But yeah, man, it's just honestly, man, it's like a pinch me moment. I mean, this isn't live or going out like today, right?
Right. We'll do it closer to the show date. Okay,
cool. So like as we record, I mean, we're about to announce Welcome to Rockville. That'll be announced tomorrow. Like, I mean, it's fucking wild, man. It's wild that this many people are excited to see the band, and that it's kind of come back around bigger than it might even be bigger than any time that I've been in the band. Because, when I joined in 2002, I mean, that was kind of, we're on the way down. We were touring with Dope. We did a tour with Dope back then, Dope and Skin Lab. And, it was a fun tour, but I could tell like the wheels were falling off back then. And then when we reconvened in 2007 for like that kind of, which is weird now that time flies or whatever, but that was only 5 years after the breakup, but it felt like a reunion tour back then. And, nobody could have given less of a crap about Primer 55 at the time. And so we were playing a lot of Joe's Bar and Grills to like 5 people. But it was weird because those 5 people would be like super fans. So you're like, they're getting into it. They're having the time of their life, but you're looking out seeing 5 people and you're like, you're trying to do the whole, like, if it's 5 or 500, you're going to play the same show, and, which is a bunch of crap. But, but yeah, so I'm excited to kind of see, the reception of the band and getting back out. And it's wild just seeing, the band on flyers again, because I mean, like I said, at the very beginning of this, Bobby's health, Bobby's health and all that stuff. I'm just happy to see that he's still alive. All of everything after this is, icing on the cake.
Well, you mentioned it, Skin Lab, they're back out doing it again. I know you talked to Johnny from Spine Shank. They're doing it again. You mentioned the Machine Shop. I think about Taproot. Taproot's out there doing it, and even had new material a couple years ago. So, whether it's here, whether it's just a fleeting nostalgia thing or not, I mean, new metal's alive. And the 40-year-old me loves that, and the 16-year-old me would definitely love that. And Primer is so much a part of that, especially Introduction to Mayhem. And Anthony, you weren't on yet, but we were talking about how much, because I know you're a fan too of that second record, and how just underrated that record was. If you want to talk about that, any?
Yeah, the that album, All in the Family, that song, I still love. I still have that. I picked that up and put it on my playlist today, even.
Nice.
It's such a good record, and it's very underrated. It's good content lyrically. It's very personable, which was a bit of a change from the introduction, I think, in that aspect. But and it definitely felt more mature from introduction as well. But yeah, I think that's a completely underrated record.
Yeah, it's funny because when I joined, obviously, the new release had already come out, but I originally auditioned for Primer between the two records. So like I learned a lot of Introduction to Mayhem, and I kind of actually knowing how the band works now, like I totally get why I kind of didn't get the gig back then. I think had I just said back then that I was the bass player, I probably would have been in the band, kind of deal. But because they ended up going with Kobe, and I think Kobe was just a friend of Preston's, and that's kind of how it all came together. Yeah. It's kind of like threw together and a mishmash, because I think I auditioned probably 2 or 3 times, and I also came up and helped audition drummers. Like I played with them a lot before I joined the band, and I came up and did all this, and then I actually I was like, all right, I'm just going to give an ultimatum, So I called Jason, and I'm like, I need to know now if I'm in the band or not, which was not the way to go, because Bobby was kind of Bobby was the decision maker of the band. So I basically hit up the wrong person to kind of put my foot down. And so when I quit 12 Volt, I emailed like 3 people, because I had like a couple of emails, and I had like, one of them was Bobby. I think I emailed like Pressure 4-5, which is kind of funny because Pressure 4-5 and Primer 55 emailed like one other person, and Bobby got back to me, and he was like, hey, I'm about to do this Primer tour, but when I get back, let's do this other band, come. I actually had to drive from Nashville to Louisville to hear the music, because that was before MP3s were prevalent. So I came up, and actually we drove around in his car and listened to the music. And back to what you were kind of talking about earlier, Chad, I was like, he could have played me anything. I was in because it was Bobby. And when I first met Primer, like at that show that I was actually, I don't even think I've really ever even got to that part of the story, was Sick and Twisted tour. Stained was supposed to play Louisville on a night off of that tour, and Primer was going to open. And so we followed the thing because of Stained ended up canceling, so Primer played a full set, and that was the first time I'd ever really heard or seen them, and they were awesome. But then after the show, like Bobby and Jason just like walked by me, and you could just feel like this energy of like it factor, like when you're around those people that can just change the air in a room. And that was kind of like the first time where I was like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I want to be with that guy. I want to do that. And so when it came time that it was posted on like the PRP that they were looking for bass players, I emailed the guy that ran the site, because I was friendly with him through 12 volt, and I still have the emails because they're in a weird old email account that every once in a while I have to go into to find something, but I archived those emails. And the email from the guy from the PRP, from Wookubus from the PRP, was, I'll give you his email, but you have a really cool thing going with 12 volt, so I don't want to mess that up or something like that. So long story short, I auditioned for Primer, put my foot down, don't get it. They go with Kobe. I got a CD sampler called "Dude, Where's My Skull," which is totally 2000s, a name. And the first track on it was "This Life." And I get home and I've got the big stereo system and I hit play and "This Life" comes on, and I'm immediately crushed. I'm like, this is going to be fucking huge. Like, this is, I've missed my opportunity. Like, life is over. I was 21, 22 years old, but I was I totally fucked up this one or whatever. And then, so when I finally do quit 12 volt, email Bobby, and he emails me, when I get back from tour, let's do this, we'll do this side band. And I was like, all right. And then 3 days before the tour, I'm delivering pizza for Domino's. I get a phone call and he's like, "You want to be in the band?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "All right, well, I'll email you the set list, learn it, and be here, Wednesday or some shit." And so I was like, all right, fuck. So I have to learn the seat, learn the songs. And I'm assuming we're going to do a full on, rehearsal. We're going to go in and we're going to practice and get this right, blah, blah, blah. We showed up, we played 1.5 songs, maybe. They got in a fight. Jason and Bobby and whoever else got in a fight. Just fucking load up the gear. And then, so we just loaded up, and I'm like, I don't really know the songs that well.
Oh, wow.
So we opened the tour in Brooklyn at L'Amour, and I'm just shit in the bed. I know some of it. I don't know some of it. I made it through the set. Julia from Fuse was there. Remember her, Mistress Julia or whatever. I vividly remember just sucking live and looking over and seeing her and just and that's the height of Uranium or whatever her show was. That would have been shit in the bed in front of Ricky Rackman at the time.
Yeah. She's the female version of that.
Yeah, she was female Ricky Rackman. And so I got off the stage and Bobby was just "You motherfucker." And so basically from every day, I just had a bass in my hand and I'm just running I'm running songs in the van. I'm running songs and so now I think that's why I got PTSD. So now I've ran the set every day for 2 months, getting ready for this one, just because I just don't want to be the guy that's not, not prepared.
Well, not that we want to ruin it for anybody, but are you playing an Introduction to Mayhem in full?
Mm-hmm.
Are you playing anything off the second record?
Yeah, we've got Introduction to Mayhem in full. And then I think we got 5 songs off the new release. I think we're gonna close the show with. Actually, I'll throw this out to you guys. The debate is play Introduction to Mayhem. It's not in order. It's but it's all the songs. Yeah. End with Loose, and then go into the new release songs, or play all of Introduction to Mayhem, play the new release, and then play Loose at the very end. I'm kind of team play the entire album together and then the new release songs, but Bobby's kind of wanting Loose as the closer of the entire night.
My personal opinion is, especially at Pops, I think you end with Loose.
All right, end with Loose.
I mean, just because the video was shot there, and there's that connection there in St. Louis. But it's totally. So yeah, what's funny is the last tour we did. I remember we opened with Loose and played This Life second. And it always blew my mind. I'm like, why are we just blowing our load the first 2 songs? The 2 quote unquote singles off the 2 records is right out the gate. But yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like it, like you were saying, the latter of that, the chronological order ish. Though it might not be track by track, but I kind of like it that way. But I feel like you got to end with Loose. It's just such a tie in there with Pops and St. Louis, and people that know are gonna know. And Man, we're excited about it. October 10th, doors are at 6, shows at 7. Primer 55, the 25-year anniversary of Introduction to Mayhem. We've taken up way too much of your time, Josh, but we are big fans of Primer. We're big fans of you and love everything that you're doing. And, there's a brotherhood there. We're podcasters together, metal podcasters together. Thank you for not suing us, although I guess technically you still could. But thanks so much, man.
I got to make sure Anthony knows that I was just busting balls wearing the shirt. So
I was going to ask where the hell can I get one of those? Because I love it.
I think I had this up on like one of those, Teesprings or something at one point. And supposedly I got a cease and desist from Pantera, but the person that said it, I don't believe. Like, they were friendly with the band, but I don't think that I think that they were just trying to shut it down on their own. So I think there's probably only like 2 of these in existence. So.
Well, our original logo is Ride the Lightning album with Vulgar Display of Podcast in like the Hatebreed flame font.
Yeah.
And the name, obviously. So when we interviewed Jamie Josta, we're like, right out the gate, we're like, how litigious are you? Because we don't have the money to be doing a bunch of lawyers, but really just everything that we do is just an homage of what we're fans of and been fans of for many years. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I would never do anything like this to, confuse the marketplace or try to make money off of something. It's always an homage and, just a shout out to what I grew up listening to. I mean, I've got the Talk Toomey logo in a Metallica logo, and I've got it in, the one main one I had for a long time was my Back to the Future zombie shirt that I had made, stuff like that. So yeah, it's always an homage, man. It's always
absolutely.
We're just fans.
October 10th, Primer 55. I can't believe I'm even saying that. 25-year anniversary of Introduction to Mayhem. Doors are at 6, shows at 7. We're going to be there, man. We're excited for it. And again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you guys for having me.